there, Retro Film Maven here. So it's been over 100 years, and there's no denying that D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation is easily one of the most controversial films ever made, whether it be the 20th or 21st century or all times. The Birth of a Nation, quite simply, is about a man who goes to war during the Civil War, and when he comes back from said war, ends up starting the Ku Klux Klan. This is the main protagonist. Now, note, not the antagonist, the protagonist. This is the hero of the story. The hero of the story is a Klansman. Now, the film by Griffith is based on the novel The Klansman, an historical romance of the Ku Klux Klan written by Thomas Dixon Jr. Dixon also adapted his novel for the screen. Now, Birth of a Nation clearly is a difficult film to actually provide an objective review without getting your own personal opinions and feelings mixed in with the critical analysis. Right off the bat, I want to say, as a film, it's a technical marvel as a film, because you got to consider back in 1915, that film was in its infancy, and there weren't really that many filmmakers out there who really were able to embrace and utilize and maximize the usage of the medium. If you ever sat down to watch The Birth of a Nation and examined it as a film, totally removing all the context, just watching it as a film, you'll notice how so many of the things that we take for granted, and so many of the tools and tricks that filmmakers nowadays and throughout time have used were pretty much originated, for the most part, in this film. From the crossfades, from the double exposures, from the intercutting between simultaneous running storylines, from some of the quick editing and the use of tint, red tint in certain scenes to convey a certain feeling, an event like a fire, and yeah, so many of the things like we take rent, like wipes and things like that. Technical film language was more or less, according to some accounts, found in this film. Now, as a technical achievement, this is a pretty significant, because at the time, films are typically only like maybe short reels, like maybe 20 minutes to an hour. But Birth of a Nation runs over 3 hours long, and is considered to be one of the first roadside attraction type films to ever make its way across the country. I have no idea, without looking it up, how many theaters this actually played in, but it only played in certain cities, or a city as it moved around, to reserve seating. It's a film that I imagine had the opening score, an overture, and it had most likely had an intermission and a exit score. But and that again is now something that the reserve seating especially is pretty common nowadays. So it's almost like this is like events that were like, this is the birth of cinema as we know it. But putting the technical aside, one can easily understand how this film is viewed as a highly offensive piece of cinema. And I cannot argue with anyone who claims it to be as such. And I can't hold it against them if they don't want to see this film strictly in a cinematic sense, and speaking as a cinephile. And I can totally see why they would not want to subject themselves to sit through all this just to appreciate the fact that, okay, yeah, the film started here, whatnot. But why does this story have to be? Like I said, I haven't done any full research on this film. I just know from what I watched. I've only seen this film maybe twice, and I rewatched it recently. And the film is divided into two parts. Part one is about the Civil War, and part two is about the Reconstruction. Part one is a pretty engaging recreation of the events of the Civil War, from the beginning of the war, the battle sequences, the recreation of the assassination of Lincoln, and how these characters are intertwined in that Civil War. We're introduced to two families, one from the North, one from the South, and they get involved in the war, fighting on different sides. And we follow this family as the war just tears them apart. And the first part is a solid film. So you're probably, as you're watching the film, you're wondering, okay, I get the gist that people consider this film a ridiculously racist film, but what exactly is it about this? It seems like a fairly humble and honest recreation of the events. Now, you probably easily notice that on occasion you might see someone in blackface, meaning a Caucasian actor who's in blackface. That just made, I remember the first time I saw Birth of a Nation, I was a little confused as to what is going on here, because all I see is a Caucasian person with blackface. But there are African Americans in the film, so that's where it can get confusing, because you see, like, they're like, okay, those are clearly African American people, and then you get mixed in with them Caucasian people who are clearly in makeup, and like, why is that? Again, I did not go into details. I mean, you could come in with all kinds of possibilities. Maybe Griffith couldn't find any African American actors who could deliver the part as he wanted it, and he decided to go with Caucasian actors who can act and do that. Or maybe on the flip side, there are people, African American actors, just simply refused to perform those parts as he wanted it, and so he had to resort to what he could do. Or it could be any other of things. Like I said, I didn't do any research on this film outside of what I saw and what I interpreted. So, yeah, the first part is a solid film, and I thought the battle recreations were pretty fantastic, and it was a pretty engaging film. Although there were like some head scratching moments with the choices of score, where occasionally you will like hear something like "Oh Christmas Tree" playing over something. I'm like, and it's not Christmas, so I'm like, why are they using that? And so stuff like that, and then the obvious like sentimental stuff, like your obviously the Star Spangled Banner, or oh, I can't remember the name of the song, but there are other like stereotypical like songs of the time. Now, the second half of the film, the Reconstruction, that by far is where the problems lie. Now, being this is a silent film, there are intertitles. Now, the intertitles are meant to set up like certain scenes, give the viewers the idea of place, or like give them a little description of what they're about to see. But it does do that. But then some of these intertitles, as in the Reconstruction period especially, just like set up a very sour feeling, especially when you're looking at it now. Think of it like if you say take a picture and someone creates a meme. You could just take any picture you want, put a caption on it, and the context is changed completely from what the actual photo is. Like, you can see a sweet kitty, and then you could put like a caption on there saying it's like this kitty just like abandoned its kids or something like that, and it just totally changed the meaning of that image. Now, these intertitles in the Reconstruction part clearly do that, and I'm curious as to who exactly wrote these intertitles. I almost that willing to bet it was Dixon himself, and these intertitles set up the moments and set up the scenes, and in those intertitles there are pieces where it just feels and just reads off as blatantly racist. So that is one thing. But in the Reconstruction part, there really is a heavy use of blackface. Again, I'm not really sure as to why Griffith chose this way, but there's so much blackface in this that, again, it gets a little confusing, especially when there are parts of significant characters who are obviously supposed to be African American, but they're not. So that just kind of like throws you for a little bit. And a lot of the characters in here are played as stereo, especially even those played by actual African Americans, are plays as the stereotypical like image of what at the time colored folk were thought as as a as a raping, crazed, uncontrollable, inhuman people who just want to like just destroy. And that's the image that they present, that the second half presents. That may very well be how it plays out in Dixon's book, and I'm guessing maybe that's just how Griffith adapted it because he wanted to be faithful to the source material, and that's easily where its the biggest detriment comes from. But then again, this is a different time. This is 100 years ago. Nowadays, this wouldn't fly. It would be this. Clearly, this is the kind of film you probably wouldn't be able to make nowadays without being lynched, proverbially lynched in Hollywood. Never work here again. And then the problem is that because as I mentioned earlier, the main character that we follow in the film eventually starts a Ku Klux Klan and starts running around saving the city. And as you're going through, there's suddenly like the Klan develops and they're out to save the people of the city from these rebel rousers from the north, these uncontrollable African Americans who can't follow authority or do nothing but just follow the master's lead and just go out and destroy whatever he's told to do so, and have no moral conscience whatsoever. So the problem lies there is that as you're watching it, you're like, it's rather uncomfortable because you know you're watching the movie and you know this is your protagonist. This is the character you're supposed to be supporting and getting behind. But the protagonist is a pure-blood racist. And you're like, yeah, I'm not down with this. I'd much rather see this guy hang or get shot or something. But I'm not too keen on it. Seeing him go out to get saved, and then in the end go out and save the day. So I could totally see how this film was used as propaganda by the KKK, and I could totally see how this can just be flat out interpreted as KKK propaganda. And again, I can't argue against the fact that it's like, even though yes, this is a film, and I'm looking at this as strictly as a film, I can totally see how this is interpreted as such. Film is subjective, that you take out of it whatever you want, and some people will see this as that, other people will just see this as hate, and fueling hate, and I would probably put myself in the latter. I would likely put myself in the latter, yet still being able to pass judgment on it just as a cinematic film. So Birth of a Nation very much deserves its reputation as one of the most disturbing and controversial films of all time. It's a very you might even say the level of comfort it puts you at is to take a fantastic film like 12 Years a Slave and to watch the whipping of Lupita Nyong'o, and that whole sequence was so gut-wrenching and uncomfortable, and that is probably 10 times fold here because you know that what you're watching is very likely an interpretation of what exactly happened back in the Civil War and the years after. And it's just quite unsettling to know that dark period exists in our history. But I'm digressing and going off topic. This is about the movie itself. So As I said, I would have to give Birth of a Nation, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, the film, 3.5 stars out of 5. It is a well-made film. It's very engaging. It does move along. While it might need it a little shortening here and there, it is captivating. But again, the themes, the context, and the subject matter are just very unsettling and not very comfortable to really not only watch, but not to wouldn't want to revisit. So yeah, in the historical context, I would have to say this is an important film. But in a moral context and societal context, it's certainly is repugnant. But again, this is about the movie. This is about film. And this is what Retro Film Haven is about. To talk about the movies and how we interpret them. So D.W. Griffith's controversial epic, Birth of a Nation, 3.5 stars out of 5. So, have you seen Birth of a Nation? Have you no desire to see Birth of a Nation? Please comment below and let me know. I'm very curious to find out. If you like this review, please hit that like button. And be sure to hit the bell button so you can be notified when I add new retro reviews. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so you can be notified when I update new videos. And as always, please be sure to check out retrofilmhaven.com for the latest and greatest from the films from the past, like Birth of a Nation. So until my friends, see you at the movies.